16 Worley Road are mock Tudor properties. Would you like to see them?
We will take your word for that, and I'm assuming these are close to the site.
They are just down the road from the site.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, I think Councillor Edgar might have frozen, so he might just want to switch his camera on and off. Oh, he's moving.
No, I'm not frozen. I've just made a point. 14 and 16 are mock Tudor.
So that point, is that all you wanted to say, Councillor Edgar, at this stage?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. Right. So I will now ask Councillor Williams and then Councillor Jeffrey, please.
Okay. Right, just on sticking with the design element for a moment. It's very tempting to talk about the flooding and the air condition, but we have to stick to what's on the brief, as it were. I think the mock Tudor element is a little bit overemphasised, I feel, from what Councillor Fowles said. I've looked at them. There's certainly not all the properties have got that kind of detailing and accenting on. There's only a few of them, and they tend to be on this sort of corner, turns of the corners. I actually think, compared, and I mentioned this to Mr. Suckley during the cross-examination, as it were, during the questions, was that, you know, I actually think, compared to a lot of the development designs that we see, these are actually very good. I do think, though, I'm wondering, I mean, I did raise an issue that Macclesfield Civic Society raised, which was about some elements, you know, a bit more pizzazz, I suppose, would be the word, of some aspects. And we have had applications in front of us where in Knutsford, for example, where we have made that point. Very different situation, very different location, but nevertheless, as a strategic planning board, we have called for more individualized designs. I actually think design-wise, this is quite a good scheme, but I'm minded that the edge where it meets what remains of the green belt, and I particularly come back to a point that Councillor Smetham raised about the principle of taking out a community orchard. I know there's mitigation, the trees are going to be replaced. That doesn't sit very well with me, and I have to say that there are elements of this scheme that don't sit very well with me at all. I would much rather it be somewhere else rather than where it is, but you know, that's not up for grabs, that's not up for discussion. But in the light of what we've got, I think we've got a reasonably, you know, it's a well presented scheme, it's a quality scheme, but I think with some mitigation around where it abuts onto the green belt, perhaps something in there to strengthen the edge of it, and also perhaps on the edge of the actual development itself as it comes towards the road, something a bit more signature. It's a very mixed area. I do know the area, and it's a mix of housing, different styles, and I don't think this is completely out of keeping, but with a little bit of extra tweaks, I think it may be something that looks even better than it does now. I'd leave that for colleagues to debate.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I now have Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Groves.
Thanks, Chair. So design-wise, it's not really a big factor for me because I think, like with the Parkgate application we looked at a couple of weeks ago, it's kind of set back, so there'll be a limited number of properties that you'll see from Chelford Road or Worley Road. I think there's just 2 or 3. On that note, to me, it's interchangeable with the Parkgate. There's no kind of distinction there at all. It's pretty much exactly the same houses with some mock Tudor on, as far as I can see. Even the street scene illustrations that we've been given, it will be difficult to tell the developments apart. So from that perspective, I mean, I wouldn't buy one, but I think Bellway know what they're doing, and the design officer seems happy, so that's not a big factor for me. I think most of the aspects that we've most of the aspects of concern are outside our remit today, mainly the highways and the air quality side of things. With the air quality, I've been, while we've been discussing this, I've been looking at the air quality monitoring report from last year, and it would seem that the Broken Cross monitoring area, it's been below the objective of 40 micrograms in 2019, and it seems to be coming down, and that should, if we take it as read that we're getting the Broken Cross highway works, should further drop. So I think that alleviates quite a few of my concerns. Likewise with the flooding, which was the main concern for me, it would seem that surface water, surface kind of puddling. So I think the drainage works part of the scheme should address that. So that's not a problem for me. The community woodland, I absolutely hate the idea of it being taken away, because it's more than just trees. The community have put their effort into that, and they'll have attachment to it. I really hate that idea, but again, that's out of our hands. It's part of the outline permission, or it was accepted at outline that'll be sacrificed. So subject to the condition about peat removal that we discussed earlier, about further peat mitigation strategy, if there's any variance, I'd be minded to approve this and probably propose it. The reason I need that condition in there is because it's more public perception than anything, in that the issue that we got in Wilmslow is that there's trucks and trucks and trucks of waste being taken off a site, and people are saying that they're still extracting peat. So I want some kind of measure or some kind of teeth to be able to enforce that. So yeah, I'd be minded to approve this application, just not because I like it, but just because we've got limited options for refusal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Groves.
I'm not sure if he's on mute, Chairman.
Councillor Groves, we can't hear you.
Sorry, Chair, pressed the wrong button. With regards to design, I think some care and imagination has been used here. And whilst it might not win a Royal Institute of British Architectural Award, I think it will blend in with the surrounding properties. I am minded that officers have recommended this application for approval, given as it does bring environmental, economic and social benefits. I was initially concerned, as I know other councillors were, about flooding, but those concerns have been addressed in my view, and I am now reassured. And if Councillor Jeffrey is minded to propose, I'm minded to second. But I agree with Councillor Jeffrey. I would like to see a condition with regard to peat extraction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farrell wishes to come back, and as he is the neighbouring councillor, I will allow him to do so at this stage. Councillor Farrell, and then I'm aware that Councillors Hogman and Redstone wish to speak. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to come back on the point raised by Councillor Edgar in regards to, I think it was 1416 Worley Road. This is actually, I think if it's the right one, it's actually a single building. It's combined semi-detached bungalows. Yeah, that is a single building with a single bit of, not Tudor, what you'd call it. But, in regards to design cues for a character, there are a lot more attractive properties and styles, in my opinion. It's obviously designs are a subjective issue. But when we mentioned in regards to the 20s and 30s Weaver cottages style, there's a lot of them, lots more of them in the local area that the design could take cues from and be more attractive and more in keeping. I do feel it's obviously I'm at an advantage of knowing the area. Obviously, during lockdown we can't do site visits, but I feel that this, in regard to design, it would benefit from a site visit. It's a shame we can't have that. I just don't understand. You can take a single semi-detached bungalow that has one facade, top facade, Mock Tudor and say, oh, we'll use that for the character of an entire development. When you've got more in many more properties locally. And also, Councillor Jeffrey, and this is another point why it would really benefit from a site visit. Councillor Jeffrey just said the development was offset against, well, offset into the away from the road. That whole area is very visible. You know, there's nothing really stopping you from driving down Telford Road and looking into the field. In fact, that's one of the things you can see all the way across the field to the back of the houses on Worley Road. So they won't be obscured, and just because they're in a bit from the development, it's not going to be, you know, and by saying that, aren't you saying that it's unattractive? Because if you're justifying the design choice by saying, oh, you can't see it, then aren't you just admitting that it's unattractive in that case? So why would we approve a unattractive development?
Councillor Farrell, can I ask that you don't put words into other members' mouths, please? That isn't what Councillor Jeffrey said. What he was saying is that the amount of the site that would be visible from outside was limited, and that was the point he was making. He wasn't suggesting that the properties were unattractive.
Right, well, I would, you know,
I understand you have your opinion, but you shouldn't be putting words in other councillors' mouths. Just to be careful. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Well, if Councillor Jeffrey wants to clarify what he meant by, you know, some of those houses wouldn't be visible and the justification by the design choice for that, then that's fine. Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much. Right, I'm assuming Councillor Jeffrey doesn't want to come back. He hasn't put in the box, and I hope I haven't been speaking out of turn, but that wasn't what I heard him say. So I'm now going to call on Councillor Hogben and then Councillor Redstone, and then Councillor Edgar wishes to come back. Councillor Hogben.
Yeah, well, I think I think Councillor Farrell has made a proposition that we defer this, and he suggested something to do with design. I would be quite prepared to second that proposal to defer. And I have other concerns, and no doubt they will be dismissed by some people in the meantime, because we can't go and revisit the bigger picture. But we've had all this before elsewhere. You know, if you have a jigsaw and you just do each quarter at a time, if you don't look at the bigger picture, you finish up when you think you've completed the jigsaw, you find you've got some gaps, or pieces that are missing, or pieces that are left over, and it doesn't actually necessarily fit together very well. It's not and you finish up with a bigger picture that you didn't expect. Anyway, I would suggest I heard what Mr. Law had to say about another planning application, which is still to be decided, probably about, I think it says on the website, in about March, and that was the one about the famous condition 6. And it seems to me, quite frankly, that if you've got an outline planning approval that is that assumes such a condition, you know, that there should be some traffic mitigation measures and the like, and pollution measures. Anyway, the roundabout. Surely, if one of those conditions is going to be removed, then actually that should be determined first before you determine the detailed ones. Now, it's a matter of public record. Anyone can go and look at application 20/4425442M. It's on the website, and there's 233 comments there. There were at the last count. But right at the beginning, the reason for that coming forward, the removal of that condition, is because of a failure to agree, and it states on the public record, failure to agree between the owners of this site, which I think is Robinson's, presumably the brewery, and another party, who were going to put some money into the scheme, but now don't view it as a priority. So then would come the question, if that condition were removed, what would happen then? Would some other developer then say, well, actually, this isn't on our list of priorities because our costs have increased? It materially affects the outline approval within which this particular application is covered. And as has been pointed out, back in September 2018, Councillor Merry, who then was chair of Strategic Planning Board, did ask that all these applications be considered as a whole, as a bigger picture, and also that reserved matters come back afterwards. So it seems to me, if the outline application is going to be changed, or there's a move to do that, then that should be determined first. So I think that could be considered as a second grounds for deferral, apart from the design question. And then aside from that, I do have concerns myself about the geo assessment, the hydrogeological impacts of a scheme which is going to have 180, well, the various schemes taken together north of Chelford Road will amount to 187 if all approved, which is, a fair proportion, 18.5% higher than the approximate number in the local plan. And I don't know what's happening. And as to the south of the road, there might be moves to increase the numbers there. But whichever way you look at it, there are proposals taken cumulatively to increase the number of houses across this whole belt, and surely that must have some hydrogeological impacts on this site and the site we'll be no doubt considering next, and others. And I think I would suggest that a new assessment is needed, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be too dramatic, but it strikes me that this field is a peat bog. We don't know how much peat is there. Right, it's in the local plan, and I'd say, well, 3.5 years ago, I voted against approval of the local plan because of various flaws, and this was one of them. But I do think we are where we are, and I do think a new assessment is needed of the impacts on the area. And that has a bearing plainly on both, I would have thought, on the flooding impacts as well. And another concern, and I won't go on any further than this, is seriously about safe walking routes to schools, wherever those schools are, and wherever the schools are that have places to accommodate the children who in due course will be living in this sort of area if these are approved. So there's two or three, well, a couple of further things I think need to be added to the proposal to defer that Councillor Farrell has proposed, and I invite him to consider them. But I'm prepared to second his proposal to defer anyway.
Okay, before I go to call Councillors Redstone and Edgar, I have checked with Sarah, and our understanding is that at this stage in the proceedings, Councillor Farrell has only indicated an intention to call for the matter to be deferred. He hasn't actually proposed that formally yet. So I don't wish to. I think it's appropriate that we hear the whole debate. So I'm going to allow Councillors Redstone and Edgar, who had indicated their wish to speak before Councillor Hogben spoke, to speak first, and then I will go back to Councillor Farrell to ask him whether or not that is a formal proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would be prepared to actually second Councillor Hogben's proposal if he wanted to make that into a formal resolution, because I agree with him. I think there are issues over the design. I particularly think there's issues over the geo survey that was carried out, which is the basis of the flood mitigation system that they put in. I can't see how you can do that without full knowledge of the facts. And if they don't know how much peat is under there, how can they possibly design a system to accommodate what effectively is a huge sponge? And if they're going to take it out, then they're going to have to replace it with something. And I don't see how they know at this stage what that will be. And I also raised the same issue regarding the number of houses on this development. I feel that with all the other problems in this area regarding air pollution and the pressure on the roads, that lower rather than more is better, particularly as there's no demand for these houses anyway. So I can't see the point of giving gratuitous permissions for houses which hopefully will never be built. So I would, as I say, if Councillor Hogburn is prepared to put in the substantive.
Councillor Redstone, you just made a comment regarding there's no demand for these houses.
We heard, Chair, that there is an excess of houses in Macclesfield at the moment.
So you're referring to the comments made by the member of the public?
Yes.
I was just seeking clarification. That's fine. Okay.
Thank you. Anyway, I'll listen to my colleagues now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Edgar, you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise a point of clarification regarding mock Tudor buildings. On Worley Road, numbers 14, 16, 18, 29, 109 and Hillview have got mock Tudor features. So therefore, the design of those properties on the new development are in context with other properties on Worley Road. Thank you.
Okay, is that all you wanted to say?
Right. It is, yes. Someone was telling me I could only see one, when in fact I can see 7. Okay,
thank you very much. I would like to, before I go to Councillor Farrell, can I just double check in the interest of fairness, that Councillor Jeffrey also indicated a indication that he wished to make a proposition, and that, in my recollection, was prior to the Councillor Farrell speaking. So did you intend to propose an approval of this scheme subject to an additional condition being put forward? I just want to clarify, I'm not asking you to do so, I'm just seeking whether or not you were proposing at that stage, or you were merely seeking to propose, contemplating it.
I was contemplating it, Chair, because I hadn't heard the rest of the debate.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, in that case, because Councillor Farrell spoke first, I'm going to go to Councillor Farrell again and say, Councillor Farrell, do you wish to make a formal proposition, as was suggested by Councillor Hogburn, to defer this item? Councillor Farrell?
Yes, hi Chair. Yes, I would, for the reasons stated. In regards to, I do believe, just a justification for this.
Right, can I just clarify? My recollection is that you wish the matter to be deferred in order that we could the council can revisit the design of the scheme in terms of house types, and Councillor Hogburn was suggesting he might like you to review that to extend it to include other matters. Are you happy to take those other points on board, or do you wish to stick to what you suggested in the first place?
Yes, I would like to take Councillor Hogburn's points on board. I do feel that these reserve matters issue with the landscaping, and in the report, the levels on the site are being described to be backfilled or changed through the extraction of peat. So it is directly related to the landscaping of the development, and you don't know if you're using that peat to backfill and adjust the levels of development. You don't know how much peat you've got. If that's your solution to moving the peat is to use it for the landscaping, and you don't know how much peat there is, then we may get to a situation where there's excess peat, and what do we do with that? So yeah, for that reason, I would take on Councillor Hogben.
So just to clarify, you are suggesting that the matter be deferred on the grounds of further investigate. I have noted, Mr. Malcolm, that you wish to come back, but I'm just clarifying matters with the proposer. You are saying that the matter should be deferred to consider two areas. One is the design, and the second is the impact of the peat extraction relative to how that would impact on the overall landscaping of the site. Those are the two issues you are not seeking to have it deferred, as Councillor Hogben was suggesting, on matters relating to the modification to or not of condition number 6, or on other matters relating to air quality.
That's correct, yeah. So
just on those 2 points.
So the design,
yeah.
I would like the housing mix to be looked at again, and also the peat and landscaping issue.
So when you say housing mix, are you asking, because officers need to know this is clear, are you suggesting that the variety, are we talking about the design of the houses, or the number of rooms they have?
The design of houses, and for the number of bedrooms to be more reflective of.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. This is your point relating to the number of smaller units relative to larger units across the site.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So those 2 points, plus the issue with to be revisited about how you would deal with the peat situation in terms of the landscaping of the site. Those are the 3 points that you wished it to be deferred on.
Yes, please.
Okay, fine. Does that proposition have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, you fully
I'm prepared to second that. I do wonder, of course, if Councillor Farrell, bear in mind, talking about what happens when you move peat about, and if you like, what we want to know is what is going to be the hydrogeological impacts of doing that. So I would suggest that that ought to be revisited too, especially given the nature of this site. So I just wonder I'd ask if he will include that within that third condition, I think it was. So I'm very happy to hear what Mr. Malcolm has to say about it.
That's fine. We will go to Mr. Malcolm in a moment. Councillor Farrell, are you in agreement with Councillor Hogben's request that the issue relating to peat also looks at the data relating to the geo, whatever it was that I can't remember, but I know what he means.
Yeah, sorry, I just assumed that the geo environmental assessment would be
part of that. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Right. So before we go to the vote, I'm going to because we have a proposition that's been formally seconded, I'm going to ask Mr. Malcolm to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've helped to clarify where I first thought this was potentially going, but I think just to I suppose just to reiterate a little bit, I mean, obviously the design issue, that's down to individuals. Obviously officers believe the design is acceptable, and other councillors have mentioned why we've ended up with the well, I prefer to just sort of say that some of the black and white detailing as opposed to mock Tudor, because a full mock Tudor basically has a first floor that is traditionally sort of the black and white that you associate. This is just black and white detailing, and I think that's sort of reflected in the buildings nearby. So maybe it's a play on words in terms of mock Tudor, but it's just a black and white detailing that's reflected in the locality. I noticed the Packhorse pub is a little bit more of the mock Tudor, which is the one just down the road near Broken Cross. That's where it's got a little bit more on the first floor. But obviously, design is down to individuals, and you've got your own views on that. So I'll leave you to that. Other than, you know, we've taken a cue from the character in the area locally, and we've also looked at, you know, Worley Road and the surroundings. So the design has come about and is supported by our urban designers. So I'll just leave that one there. I think in terms of the peat issues and the landscaping, we have got conditions to deal with levels, because we've still got, you know, again, that's a fairly standard one that we have anyway. We've also expressed a view that we're happy to have an additional condition about the removal of the condition removal of peat off site in respect of the remediation works that have been put forward. And clearly, landscaping is a detail that will come forward. I'm not specifically sure what the landscaping is. It seems to be related to, well, if there's lots of peat, then that may lead to significant increases in land levels on the site. But then we've got a condition that deals with that. So I'm struggling a little bit to understand what it is specifically about the landscaping, which is a reserve matter, that effectively is problematic. And I think the final one I think was just on the housing mix. Again, down to individuals, members' views on that. I think in terms of the balance that we've got, and that we haven't even got to the second application yet, but the reason we've got more applications is that we do have smaller dwellings on the site, and I think that was the point that was made. So, I think as Councillor Farrell said, no site is going to deliver all of those requirements, but I say you need to be careful with some of the figures that you see in terms of that it is a request, as I think the chair clarified in terms of the home choice situation. So I think it's just a note of caution in terms of, I'm unsure at the moment what we are actually deferring for in terms of the landscape reason. The design is fine. I suppose if I was being blunt about it, it's like, well, what design do we want to come back with? Because everybody will have a slightly different one in terms of, do we just get rid of the black and white? Do we then just have a focus on brick? And I say, for me, there's quite a variety in the area, and I think that's reflected in the design of the building. So Chair, yeah, just before you go to the vote on the deferral, say just to sort of put it in context and sort of try and understand maybe a little bit more about that landscaping issue, because I'm struggling a little bit to understand what it is about the landscaping, other than we might have more peat. But again, we dealt with all of these sort of issues that outline in terms of the hydrogeological stuff, and we've got support from environmental regulatory services teams. Yeah, I think we've got a condition that I think we talked about that would deal with the taking any more stuff off site. So maybe just a bit of clarification on that landscaping point, Chair, if possible.
I am sure that Mr. Right, I'm conscious that whilst you were speaking, Councillor Hogman asked to come back. Despite saying that I was not going to call him back, I'm going to let him do so. I will then go back to Councillor Farrell, who is the proposer of the motion, to determine some clarification about what he means about issues relating to peat and landscape. But firstly, Councillor Hogman.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I think my point's quite straightforward. It's been acknowledged we don't know how much peat there might be. If there's a lot of peat, if there's more peat than is expected, then that would be put somewhere else, and we don't know exactly where it would be put. And eventually, the volume of peat could readily affect the whole layout of this scheme. In ways that, for example, the obvious place to put the peat might be at the edge, where the public open spaces. Might that not affect, for example, the location of the play area, which ought to be much more central in my opinion, but I'll leave that aside. Peat volumes could affect the layout of the whole site. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farrell, do you have anything further to add to assist Mr. Malcolm?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Hogman just answered it then. So, yeah, the mitigation described in the report is for the peat to remain on site by filling in the levels in the landscaping. If we don't fully understand how much peat is actually there, then it's like you're overfilling the bucket, aren't you? So that's the why.
Okay, I think that I understand where you're coming from. Mr. Malcolm, do you understand what is meant by that, what you're looking for in terms of what you were being asked to provide if we deferred this item, what the applicants would be, we're asking them to provide, which or agree to if they couldn't provide the detail at this stage?
Yeah, I think I understand the point, but I suppose we're being on the negative side of it, as in we've got a report that shows trial pits, which is the standard way of doing these things, which shows the depths of the peat in certain areas. The only way I imagine that we would know how much peat is on the entire site would be to basically dig down across the whole site, which is what would happen when they develop the site. And what I'm saying is we're going to put a condition in respect to deal with the removal of the peat. And I suppose I'm trying to understand a little bit what it would take to actually understand how much peat we have on the site. We've got trial pits, so I think we can only really go on what would be reasonable to request applicants to submit. And as far as I know, they've submitted that. So yeah, that's my point.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Malcolm. I also note that actually looking at the plan, the areas that we would be talking about where we don't know how much peat would be extracted are those areas for highway works only because of the amount. But I know Mr. Law wishes to come back before I move to the vote. So, Mr. Law.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I won't keep you too long. In terms of the peat, and you've just alluded to it, thank you, Chairman. Just because even if there were further deposits of peat found, if they're below where buildings are to go on top of, we can, or the developer can get around that in terms of various foundation techniques, not requiring the removal of that peat. So that's piling techniques, backfilling, trench foundations, those kinds of techniques. Where it's a fundamental that we can't have peat underneath a structure that is a road because of the load bearing on that. You obviously can't pile in terms of the foundations of a road. And so it will be limited to those road areas. And in terms of the condition that we referenced earlier, if it would assist that in a bit more detail, what that condition would say would be along the lines of, just bear with me. If during the course of development peat not previously identified is found to be present, no further works shall be undertaken in the affected area until that peat deposit has been reported to the LPA. Further works will then be required to provide a further mitigation strategy. But as I say, that probably will just be limited to the internal roads rather than elsewhere in the development where the peat deposits can be retained as far as practicable with the use of various foundation techniques. So hopefully that helps members a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I intend to move to the vote, and I will call members of the board in alphabetical order as I'm required to do, and I will begin by Councillor Critchley. Are you voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Councillor Steve Edgar.
Against.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For.
Councillor Peter Groves.
Against.
Councillor Steve Hogben.
For.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Rob Morton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jackie Weatherall.
Against.
Councillor Phil Williams.
On balance, for.
And I am voting against. So if somebody could please add that up for me, please.
Yes, Chairman, that's just double checking. I'm pretty sure it's 6 in favour of deferral and 5 against. So that's carried, that motion. 6 in favour of deferral and 5 against.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I got the same figures. I just had it. I'd done it the wrong way, the other way around. So that's fine. So that this item is deferred and will be brought back to us at a later stage. Right. Okay. We will now move to the next item on the agenda, which is
Chairman, sorry to
before we do that, can I just clarify something? Is the next agenda item dependent on the outcome of the one we've just voted on?
No, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That's fine. In that case, we will. Sorry, Sarah, you were going to say something?
Sorry, Chairman. I just was wondering, given the time that it's 1:45, perhaps members might like a lunch break. I don't know. It's entirely up to you, but I'm just thinking it's only been a 10-minute break for members, and would they feel appropriate to break for half an hour for a more substantial break, but or would you like to continue with this?
Right, I've got several comments here. Somebody is saying, I'm assuming Councillor Redstone, you're saying yes, please, to the request for a break. And Councillor, sorry, Mr. Malcolm wants to say something quickly. So, Mr. Malcolm, you are first.
Chair, I mean, I think given that that application has been deferred, I have to say I see little point in carrying on with the full planning application, because the same concerns will have to be raised on that application in respect of landscaping and peat. And I think ultimately, being honest, we would waste a lot of time discussing it, and I think we just need to. So I will actively request members to allow me to withdraw that from the agenda today, and we'll bring it back with the other application at a future date. It's just in the interest of probably expediency. I'm happy to sort of, if members wish for it to be considered because they feel they want to comment on specific points, then I'm happy for that to continue. But perhaps for you, Chair, maybe it's
I am going to propose from the chair, Mr. Malcolm, that we defer that item in order to facilitate the shared matters that relate to both applications being brought back to this committee. Does that proposition have a seconder, please?
Chair, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Groves. Okay, I'm now going to take a vote of those people.
Sorry, could I just speak, please?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, Chairman. If David's withdrawing the item from the agenda, then it doesn't need to be voted on. If you are going to take a vote on a deferral on it, then there are speakers that are listed. So it's either Mr. Malcolm withdrawing it from the agenda, or it's the committee deferring it.
So can I not take a vote on whether we object to? I wanted to establish whether or not people object to. So the proposition is there an objection to Mr. Malcolm withdrawing the item from the agenda? I apologise if my description. Councillor Groves, are you happy for me with that wording to modify that we are voting to concur with Mr. to see whether there are any objections to Mr. Malcolm withdrawing from the agenda?
Absolutely, Chair. Completely.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted, Mrs. Folan. I'm sorry to have caused you have to interject. Right, so I'm going to go through, and what you are saying is it's no objection or objection. So, Councillor Critchley.
No objection, Chair.
Councillor Edgar.
No objection.
Councillor Farrell. Councillor Farrell. I'll come back to him. Councillor Groves, obviously.
No objection.
Councillor Hogburn.
No objection, Chair.
Councillor Hogburn.
Yeah, no objection, Chair.
Councillor Jeffrey.
No objection.
Councillor Morton.
No objection.
Councillor Redstone.
No objection.
Councillor Wetherill.
No objection.
Councillor Williams.
No objection.
Obviously, I have no objection. I'm proposing. Councillor Farrell, I didn't hear you. Are you objecting or not?
No objection. Very sensible.
Thank you very much. I heard you that time. Okay, so everybody is unanimously agreed that we have no objection to Mr. Malcolm withdrawing this item from the agenda. So the item's been removed, and it is now 13:48, and I would ask members to be back for 14:20, please.
Sorry, Chairman, just to let you know, I can see you on camera, so I don't know if you want to take your camera off at the moment.
Just finishing my lunch. Probably in about 2 minutes. Oh,
Hello,
no.
Hello, Councillor Gardner.
Hello.
Are you having to rush your lobster thermidor, Stuart?
Well, I haven't had lobster for years.
Oh, right.
Like lobster.
Yeah, me too.
One of the luxury foods I do enjoy. Right, so I think we might be ready to go, are we? Sarah, are you aware of anyone indicating they're not back yet?
The only person I don't think that is in the virtual meeting is Councillor Critchley, so I'll try and send him a message to see if he's coming back, or he may have left now for the rest of the day, but I will double check.
He's not put in the
No.
Oh, has he?
He hasn't said anything.
Naughty boy.
I'll call him in, Chairman, and if obviously he doesn't accept, then we can probably assume.
What I will do is I will commence with everybody else and I'll come back to Anthony at the end. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask for a roll call to ensure everybody is back. So, Councillor Critchley, we're waiting for Councillor Edgar.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Councillor Farrell, I've just seen you. Can I hear you?
Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Groves.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm here and I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogben.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Councillor Morton.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Redstone.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Weatherall.
I'm here, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
I'm also here, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Critchley, are you with us?
Well, no, he isn't, Chairman, so I'm assuming he's not coming back, but I can keep trying.
So if we move now to, I've got to change several pages of debate. To item number 7, application 202576N November, solar farm and associated development, land adjacent to Drury Lane, Warmingham, for Moss Lane Solar Limited. I'm now going to check first if Councillor Critchley is with us. No. In that case, Mr. Malcolm, can you commence presenting the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. So hopefully. Okay. Can you see presentation, Chair?
Yeah, presentation is present and correct. Thank you very much.
Good.
Proceed.
Always a good start. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Bit of a change of tack from housing. So this is a described as a solar farm and associated development at Drury Lane in Warmingham. So I'll just run through the presentation. So the actual application site that we're looking at today is effectively in this locality. You'll see as I go through the presentation, there have been 2 other recent approvals which populate other areas of land, which we'll come back to in a few seconds. Just to highlight that in terms of the just the sort of the to and fro on that, you'll see Drury Lane is going up here, and then it wraps around the edge of the site there. So that's the extent of the site that you see there. And this is just the other site to the north, which also has benefits. You'll see from the history, also benefits from approval. And then the second one is another area of land to the bottom here. So collectively, and I just put this slide up to try and show you the collective area. So this is the actual application site that we're looking at today, and these are the previous approvals. So effectively, you've got effectively quite a large solar farm being created. In terms of this particular application, I'll come back to the photographs in a second. But in terms of this particular application, this is it's just over 26 hectares of land. It's a relatively flat area of land, and just some of the photographs there, sort of undulating landscape. These are views from Drury Lane itself. Fairly undulating sort of landscape. There are hedgerows with trees, as you can see there, typical sort of, I suppose, general countryside to an extent. A more wider picture there from Warmingham Lane, and you can see the extent of relatively flat, in places slightly undulating. And the proposal is to effectively cover that area with solar panels, and effectively say that would account for, this would produce approximately 17 megawatts, which would approximately provide for just over 5,000 homes. And in terms of the heights, these are approximately 3 meters in height. So that's just a cross section that you can see there of the individual panels. About 3 meters in height to the top of the panel, obviously angled in the right direction. And you can see, just going back, all of those thick lines there mark the rows of solar panels. I don't actually have a number of solar panels, so if members could refrain from asking that question. I don't actually know the number of panels, but you can see it's extensive. And that just shows you also, and for those members that probably haven't seen, we had a few of these a few years ago when there were subsidies in place. And while it is, as the report indicates, obviously using not the best agricultural land, it's grade 3B, the fact they're raised off the ground does enable the area to be grazed by sheep. And actually we have had examples of that taking place to the south of the borough. Just in terms of the context of the other permissions, so these other permissions have started on site to effectively commence the permission. They haven't actually started putting panels in as yet, but clearly this is to expand the site to make it much more viable as an entity. And in total, the other sites, the one to the south total just over 11 hectares. The one to the north was a similar area, just under 11 hectares, and those respectively would provide for approximately 1,500 houses each. So in effect, you would get to the total development provide for a power for approximately 8,000 houses, or 8,000 homes. In terms of the details of the scheme, there's no objections raised from any of the consultees. Landscape officers are broadly happy with the scheme. You'll see there are conditions to reflect a detailed master plan for the future. One of the conditions I did just want to highlight, which is picked up in the history of the other two sites, is that this is for a temporary period. Say temporary, it's still 40 years, but it's effectively because they are they are structures that can be removed from the land. Under the history on page 56 of the report, the reason why we had conditions to vary those applications was to extend what was originally a 25-year temporary consent to the 40 years. And in both instances, that's to ensure that this scheme has full viability, because they say those subsidies that were in place a few years ago are no longer the case. So also this needs to be self-sufficient in its own right. So clearly it ticks all of the appropriate and acceptable and positive environmental credentials, and officers feel it is in accordance with policy. There's just a minor typo I just need to highlight to members within the report, just in terms of the policies on bottom of page 56. We've got PG5 and PG6. They actually need to be PG6 and PG7, as in PG6 is open countryside and PG7 is the spatial distribution of development. But with that, Chair, it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to call Mr. James Jameson, the agent for the applicant, to address the board. If Mr. Jameson can switch on his camera and his microphone, please.
Yes, good afternoon.
Before I proceed, can I just double check with the clerk whether or not the time allocated for this speaker is 3 or 5 minutes? Because I do recall that when Mr. Suckley spoke, I only gave him 3 minutes.
Yeah, it should be 3 minutes, Chairman. Sorry, has it got the wrong thing on the screen?
Yeah, I just wanted to double check. So
Yeah,
that's fine.
it's
So
3
you
minutes.
have 3 minutes, Mr. Jameson, to address the board, and you may then be asked questions afterwards. Thank you very much. If you'd like to turn your camera and microphone on now, please.
Yeah, perfect. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present this application, and thanks also for the detailed and comprehensive officer report and the presentation we've just heard from Mr. Malcolm. I'd like to complement that briefly by summarising the benefits and the main issues of this subsidy-free solar farm. As noted by the officer, the solar farm would generate enough electricity from a clean renewable source to power the equivalent of around 5,200 local homes each year. That would make a substantial contribution to tackling climate change in the local area, noting that the council have declared a climate emergency. The site would remain in agricultural use through sheep grazing, and it's entirely 3B land, which is poorer quality, not best and most versatile, and the proposals represent an important diversification project for the landowner to support and grow his local farm business. We've worked hard to minimise impacts and maximise the range of benefits associated with the solar farm. For example, we've provided extra detail on the proposed landscaping and screening measures, including a detailed landscape and management plan, which is the level of detail usually required to discharge the landscape condition in due course. This was at the request of the council's landscape officer and also in direct response to the local parish council's suggestion of ensuring that screening is robust and carefully thought through at this earlier stage. There's no objection from the Environment Agency or the council on flooding grounds, and drainage should be improved on the site. There are no impacts on listed buildings or scheduled monuments, and archaeology will be considered carefully through planning condition. The proposals are fully reversible, and the site will be decommissioned after operation, and there are no impacts on public rights of way. There's been detailed scrutiny of the construction access route and the access point location, and it's the same as approved for the schemes to the west, which you've just seen, other than the specific access point. The access point was also moved off Warmingham Road during the determination of the application onto Drury Lane itself, so the site won't be accessed from the main road, and that was to improve visibility and the access itself. There'll be substantial biodiversity enhancements, including additional tree and hedge planting, wildflower grassland margins, bird boxes and bat boxes, and we've put in place some detailed avoidance measures for great crested newts, which have been agreed with the council's ecologist, and the proposed habitat enhancements will also support crested newts once the solar farm is operational. A community benefit funds has been proposed to be put in place, and there are opportunities for local companies during construction and operation. So drawing all this together, the proposals are low impact. It's a low level development in a reasonably flat landscape, and the solar farm would make a positive contribution to tackling climate change, noting again that the council have declared a climate emergency. Renewables and solar farms specifically are supported in the recent government's white paper on energy, and are forecast to play an important role in tackling climate change and also in the economic recovery from COVID. We've worked hard to minimise impacts as best possible through sensitive site choice and the extra landscaping details I've mentioned. There are no objections from any consultees. There's one comment of support, one comment of objection, and crucially there's support from the parish council.
Can you bring your speech to an end, please, Mr. James?
Certainly. There will be substantial biodiversity enhancements through landscaping, community benefit fund that's proposed, local opportunities for contractors, and overall it's considered the proposals comply with planning policy and guidance. We respectfully request the applications approved. Thank you, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Jameson? Okay, I have councillors Farrell and Councillor Jeffrey, but Councillor Jeffrey indicated first, so Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. Is it your expectation that actually having this over the period of 40 years will improve the quality of the agricultural land from moderate, essentially laying it fallow for 40 years? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't think it would necessarily improve the quality, say, from one bracket to another, from 3B to 3A, but it would definitely have improvements from a land management point of view, and from an agricultural and sort of environmental impact point of view, because with less use of fertiliser. The land would be grazed by sheep, but certainly the sort of intensity of land use would be reduced, which would have a sort of benefit in the wider area in terms of the wider ecosystems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair. Hello, Mr. Jameson. Yeah, I think Councillor Jeffrey kind of touched on it a little bit. I'm interested in. I've actually read some articles on this recently on solar farms being used in like a.
Can you ask your question before I get told off, please?
Okay, sorry. You mentioned sheep grazing, and you also mentioned wildflower meadows. Can you tell us about the extent of the wildflower meadows and if that would help support bee populations or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently the grass on the site is it's nothing special, bog standard kind of grazing grass. And the kind of grassland on the site will be broadly split into two habitats. So you'd have the grassland within the fence where the panels are, which will probably be kind of grassed with a special solar farm mix, which is designed to be hard-wearing, suitable for sheep grazing, but crucially high pollinating. And around the margin, so between the existing hedges and boundaries and the internal fence, there'll be a 4 or 5 metre wide buffer, and within that area we would propose to plant a wildflower margin. So that'd be a specific seed mix with high pollinating plants and flowers, which would really encourage bees and birds and insects as well. So yeah, there's a lot of thought and effort goes into the kind of biodiversity enhancement side of this thing of every solar farm we work on.
Thank you.
Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed you've got some temporary buildings on the site. Are you intending to put battery backup onto this site at any stage?
I think I'm just going to open the layout. I think the layout does include a battery compound down at the substation, so that is included as part of the proposals. I think initially, as things stand just now, it's unlikely to be deployed from day one. It is a bit of a moving feast with this sort of thing, but we've tried to future-proof it so that as the technology changes and as the grid sort of evolves into the kind of low-carbon, decentralised grid that we need to hit these climate change targets, that can be incorporated into the solar farm to really maximise its benefits.
Right. And what is the life of the panels that you are using?
Yeah, I mean, as things stand just now, and again, it's a bit of a moving feast in terms of panel supplies, but we anticipate that the panels would last the full 40 years. It may be the case in 20, 25 years, or at some point in that 40-year period, it makes economic sense to switch the panels to repower it. Essentially, over the years, the size of the panels, or the output of each panel, is dramatically increased. It's almost doubled. So it may well be that in the future, it makes sense to swap the panels. But as things stand just now, with the current availability of panels, there's no need to swap the panels. They will last that 40 years and produce a good level of power throughout that period.
Right. And what voltage are these panels running at?
Good question. So I think it's a 33 kV connection, so it's connecting to the local grid. But the actual output of each panel, forgive me, is not something I'm totally clear on. But certainly the output from the site is at 33 kilovolts. Does that answer the question?
Well, there's two ways you can do it. You can either run them all in series and put them through an inverter, or you can actually change them to AC on behind each panel. Have a little inverter there. There are advantages with both schemes, I suppose. But on your thing, I would have thought given you're going to push it up to such a high voltage, you must have a number of inverters there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the plan. It'll be 3 or 4 kind of centralised inverters to step it up.
Can I ensure?
I just want to ask the question now.
Okay,
now that I know that's the question. How are those cables going to be protected from members of the public and children?
Well, currently there's no public access to the site, but there's no cabling which isn't underground. All the cabling is underground, right, to the relevant British standard. I think it's at least a metre underground. So yeah, all the cabling is underground, especially the high voltage stuff.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can all members please be assured, however much they want to elucidate on what they are talking about, can they make sure that they are asking a question, because that is the purpose of this section. Are there any other questions? I have no other names in the chat box. In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Jameson. Can I ask that you turn off your camera and your microphone and continue to listen to the rest of the debate? Thank you very much. Okay, does Mr. Malcolm wish to come back at this stage?
No, I have nothing to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions to Mr. Malcolm about this application from members? Questions? That being a silence, I will ask who wishes to start the debate, because I haven't the foggiest idea which of you lives nearest. There's about 3 of you that are in the frame, but I don't want to upset anybody. So who wants to start the debate? Okay, you weren't in my list of potential nearest people, but you can start, Councillor Jeffrey.
I don't mind if it's more appropriate for someone else.
No. You got there first. Others are now challenging, so you have the floor.
I'd like to propose approval, Chair.
Okay, and
I'd like to second that.
Sorry, who was that? Councillor Redstone, was that you?
I did, yes.
Right, okay. Does anybody else wish to? I've got Councillor Hogman wishing to speak, or is he merely indicating that he's the nearest neighbour?
I might be the nearest councillor, but others have beaten me to it. So I would have been very happy to.
So you don't have anything to add to either of the?
No, I'm happy to support the.
Okay, so we have a proposition to approve that has been seconded. I'm assuming there are no requirements for any additional matters. Before we go any further, I do need to ask Mr. Malcolm whether he wishes to come back before we vote.
No, Chair. Happy with the conditions. They are.
In that case, let me find the appropriate stage. Can I just check with the clerk? Has Councillor Critchley joined us?
No, Chairman.
Okay, so I will begin the vote. Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Groves.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Morton.
For.
Councillor Redstone.
For.
Councillor Wetherill.
For.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you very much. I am also for. So given that Councillor Critchley is not with us, that means that is unanimously.
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I think we've got Councillor Morton with his hand up. I don't know
Yes,
whether.
I was about to ask him why that was. Councillor Morton, can you indicate why your hand is up, please?
Just forget that. I don't know why it's up.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. So we have had a vote, and that vote of members present was unanimously in favour of the proposition to approve. Okay, thank you very much. Now we will now move to what a difference that was to the previous application. Right, I will now move to item number 8, which is to consider a report on the Cheshire East Local Development Scheme between 2020 and 2022, and I will ask Mr. Owens to present this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. This report invites the board to consider an update to our local development scheme and offer any views that it has to the portfolio holder, who will decide whether to approve it or not, and to or whether or not to bring it into effect. So you're probably familiar with our local development scheme, but what these do is set out a timetable for local plan preparation. It's a legal requirement for all authorities to have one and to keep it up to date. And its purpose is to highlight to everybody what local plan documents are in preparation, when they can engage in the plan preparation process, and also to track the authorities' performance and progress in terms of its anticipated timescales for these. So the latest one we've got runs from 2018 to 2020. This updated one is badged 2020 to 2022, and it still shows that the local plan is coming forward in 4 parts. The adopted local plan strategy, adopted July 2017, the site allocations and development policies document, and you'll be familiar with that. And the next step with that is submission for examination, subject to council decision in April. And also a Part 3, a minerals and waste plan, and finally a crew hub area action plan, and both of those plans are in preparation. So there's no timetable, you may have seen, for a local plan strategy update, and under the current planning system there is a legal requirement for us to review that plan by July 2022. And by review, that doesn't mean it has to be altered. It means we've got to undertake an audit to determine whether that plan does need to be updated, and the scope of that update. However, that update is now likely to be the new style of plan envisaged in last year's planning white paper. We're expecting the government to make a response to the 44,000 or so representations it received to the white paper in the spring. It's been indicated that we should expect a new planning bill to be published by the end of 2021. So the local plan strategy update is likely to take place as one of those new style plans under that new legislative framework. So, Chair, that's all I was going to say by way of introduction.
Thank you very much. Do any members have questions? There are no public speakers registered for this item. So do members have any questions to Mr. Owens about this item? Okay, that will be a no. So thank you very much, Mr. Owens. Please stay there just in case we might need clarification before we vote on anything. The debate might raise issues that haven't been thought of at this stage. So if you can turn your screen off though, just to satisfy those. And I am now going to see who wishes to start the debate on this item. Not business review webinars, which has just come up into the inbox. So who wishes to start the debate or make a proposition? You're not usually this reticent. Okay. Right, I've got two issues now. Let me just see which one of you's first. I don't want to upset anybody. Right, I've got Councillor Edgar and then Councillor Hogman. So Councillor Edgar first.
I would suppose I'll propose it and Councillor Hogman will second it now. That's a running.
Okay, that's a proposition that we accept the report and send it forward to the portfolio holder to move matters on. Because we're not the ones starting the process. That's as set out in paragraph 2.1. That's what you're recommending, Councillor Edgar. Councillor Edgar.
It is, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And Councillor Hogman.
Yes, and I've been beaten to it again. People are so quick on the draw here.
I would suggest, Hogman, you don't go on any of those quiz shows where you have to press the buzzer then.
Anyway, I'm happy to second that proposal that it goes forward for approval.
Okay, there being no further, are there any other further speakers before I go to the vote? That's a no. Mr. Owens, do you wish to come back on anything?
No, thank you, Chair. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Malcolm, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add, Chair.
In that case, can I just double check Councillor Critchley has not joined us in the meantime?
I can't see him, Chairman.
Okay, no. I'm sure he will shout if he's here and we're not doing so. I'm going to start with Councillor.
I think, Chair, Councillor Hunter appears to be present.
I am aware of the situation with Councillor Hunter. He is merely observing.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm going to start with Councillor Edgar. For, against, or not voting. Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Groves.
For.
Councillor Hogman.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Morton.
For.
Councillor Redstone.
4, Chair.
Councillor Wetherill.
4.
Councillor Williams.
4.
I'm also 4, so that is unanimously carried by those members present. So that brings me to the close of this meeting, though members, please be aware that we have been asked to put in our diaries an additional meeting for, I think it's the 14th of March. Sarah will confirm that's right.
12th, Chairman.
The 12th of March. Oh yeah, the 14th of March is a Saturday, so, or a Sunday. That might be a bit difficult. So yeah, the Friday the 12th of March, additional meeting of the board. So that brings today's proceedings to an end. Can I thank members for attending? Can I thank those members of the public who might still be with us for persevering? And can I thank all of the officers for their work today and in the preparation up to this point? Thank you very much. So have a good evening all.